Okay, today is the 24th of Elul. Um, Today is actually the Meldado, which is the Sephardic word for yard site, is the Meldado for Haham bin Sion Haimer Uziel, who was the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel. He was also the last chief rabbi of the Mandate of Palestine. But he was the first rabbi of the state of Israel, and today is the day marking his passing, 1952, 1953, I believe. I don't know the yard sites of all rabbis. It's just that this particular rabbi has had a very meaningful impact on me. His worldview, the way he wrote, the way he spoke. I suggest looking up some of his writings and some of his some of his writings and some of his um, thoughts, and there's some really good stuff that he's written, very beautiful stuff.
His grandson is a friend of mine, about my age.
Oh yeah, really? Yeah, his grandson does a lot of interviews and stuff, and for the institute that they started it in his honor. Yeah. Actually, I think also a student of his is someone who shares your name, is Yoram Gaon. He's a famous Israeli singer. Who shares a lot of information, personal insights that from Rabbi Uziel. Another student of his was Rabbi Chaim David Halevi. If you're joining me from Mincha and Mariv on Mondays and Thursdays, I've been sharing his halachic work Mekor Hayim. He was Rabbi Halevi was a student of Rav Kook and Rav Uziel, and Rav Uziel's last surviving student, his name is Ezra Barneya, and he is, I don't know, he's pushing in his 80s, I believe. But yeah, the very, very beautiful religious humanistic stuff that he wrote. Okay, so let's get started here. We're on paragraph 104. I think it's chapter 104 technically, but paragraph 104. Excuse me. Let's see. Yes. Amar HaKuzari ani ro'esh yodei zulatchem shemenem odeshim medechem. That the Kuzari is saying to the Haber that other religions have a much richer and more bountiful afterlife than the let me put it on screen. I'm sorry. Have a much richer and more bountiful afterlife than what he's promising, the Jewish afterlife. To recover from what we talked last week, this Jewish afterlife that he described is sort of like this prophetic, intellectual, spiritual, it's very it's very unsubstantial, it seems. It's all about the spiritual realm and experiencing this divine light, and it's very non-specific. But you go and look at other religions, and there's physical, descriptions of what the afterlife is like, whether it's, rivers of wine and mansions and physical riches, and like, all these other religions are describing something much more fuller than what you're describing for me. And what do you say to that, Mr. Haber? Yeah, so the Hacham responds in paragraph 105. אמר החבר, אבל הם כולם אחרי המוות ואין בחיים הם מאומה ולא דבר שיוראה עליהם. The rabbi said, however, all their rewards purportedly come to fruition only after death. There is no benefit during one's lifetime, nor is there any indication in this lifetime of the future reward. This is very, very important distinction, and I think a lot of Jews today have kind of started to lose this idea that Torah is something, what do we say? V'chai behem. It's something you live by. It's something that is it's a path of life that makes all of its paths are pleasantness and peace, right? It's not something that you're supposed to struggle with and suffer with. I saw a book, a novelty book. It must be a novelty book. It was called like How to Be a Jewish Mother or a Jewish Parent or something like that. And the table of contents was like on suffering, on guilt, on this, and all these terrible things. Yeah, and it's a joke. It's not like a real instruction manual, I hope. But the idea that we have a Jewish guilt or a Jewish propensity for suffering isn't really the idea of Torah. It's something we've absorbed from the other peoples around us. We have a life that is full of goodness and happiness, and the benefits of mitzvot are supposed to impact us in real time. I'm learning another book with a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, and we're learning what's called in the Hebrew, it's called Havot Halevavot, the duties of the heart, I believe, or the mitzvot of the heart is how it's translated in English. And Havot Halevavot, in the introduction, he says something that I underlined that's very important to remember. I'll paraphrase it right now, is that when you are performing the mitzvot, let me start over, that the mitzvot have a sort of natural appeal to them, a natural attraction that you would like to do these mitzvot, and that they are psychologically beneficial. And it's at odds with today's sort of like, you need to just, even if you hate doing it, you have to do this mitzvah. And it's better to not like doing it and do it anyways than to like doing it and do it. Because if you don't like doing it and you're doing it anyways, then you're really doing it because you're real, true Eved Hashem. That's just not true. That's just not what the Torah was designed for. The Torah was designed, if I may say such a thing, for you to have a good life here as well. So his response to the Kuzari, who's saying, look, the afterlife, your afterlife is kind of boring, but in the other afterlives of all these other peoples, we have all these physical pleasures, we have the certain amount of spouses that we can be with, and we have all this wine and fantastical fruits that come off of the this and that, but their lives are spent only with regards to getting to the next life. There isn't an appreciation of this life here and now, that we are just in this antechamber and only waiting to get into the next world. Now, mind you, this is also a teaching in Judaism. We do believe that this world is an antechamber to the world to come. But this antechamber isn't just a purposeless hallway. It's something that we need to engage in and be happy with. And not kind of hope for. And this is something why you hear today people say, my life is difficult, but at least, I'm waiting for the Mashiach, or I'm waiting for Olam Haba, I'm waiting for that, and not really focusing on their life here. That's just a mistake, I believe. It's not what the Hachamim of classical period taught. Okay. The footnote down here, let's read the footnote. I think it's actually going to say what I said. And Judaism, on the other hand, offers spiritual benefits in this lifetime, such as prophecy and near prophecy, and its experiences which provide a glimpse of the rewards of the world to come. This is a very important topic about prophecy and near prophecy, and actually it ties in with something. If you're in the Mikra class, the Tanakh class yesterday, we were talking about prophets and what is the role of the prophet? What is a prophet? How do you recognize a prophet? And there was a concept that we brought up, that Rabbi Seltzer brought up, is Hacham Adif Minavi, that a wise, or excuse me, how do you say that really? A sage is preferable to a prophet. And you could take it very cynically and be like, well, of course the rabbis would say that the rabbis are better than the prophets. Of course they would. But no, it is, I don't believe that it's the case. It's not self-aggrandizing. It's really there to demonstrate prophecy has its limits, as even though this is the goal of a lot of Jewish rituals, it has its limits. Hold on, Anne, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, are there any modern prophets? Are there any prophets that we've come across in like the last 200-300 years, or is this just biblical prophets?
Very good question. Very, very good question. The prophetic age ended. It's been over for about 2,500 years now, a long time. And in the Gemara, and this was brought up yesterday by Rabbi Seltzer, in the Gemara, it's taught that at the end of the age of prophets, that prophecy was inherited by fools and children. That the only people who have prophecy today, who claim to speak to God, or that God speaks through them, are crazy people and kids who say I have a little bit more insight than you would think. Rabbi Seltzer said that this is a repudiation of Christianity, which is I've never thought of it that way, but it would make sense to me. I would need to look at it inside to get more context of the idea, but that the idea that, that Jesus is somehow prophesying, or that John the Baptist is somehow prophesying on behalf of God, that no, that's not the case. They're just shotim. And there is a reason for this as well. I just finished reading a fantastic book called The Gospel According to the Jews. Fantastic book. I highly recommend it. In The Gospel According to the Jews, it was written by Haham Professor Jose Faur de Feliz Memoria. He presents the events of the gospel and examines them through the Jewish perspective, through Jewish eyes, which is an important thing to take into account. Let's not just take the winner's account of history as the gospel truth, if you will, but let's see what we have to say as well. And something about an accusation made against the Pharisees is that they were always calling Jesus a fool, and that it's because they were jealous of him. And you see this in the Gospels time and time again. But there's a technical word that the Pharisees, i.e. the Hachamim, were using. That word is shoteh. If you might recognize this word shoteh, I've used it before. I used it in the example of something called a hasid shoteh. A hasid shoteh, or a pious fool, is somebody who sees a woman drowning and then does not help the woman drowning because, as v'shalom, God forbid, I should touch a woman, and that would arouse me. That's a fool. He's liable for this woman's death. So a shoteh, though, is somebody who's also patur from mitzvot, the meaning, or patur from judgment, from deen, meaning that they are not held accountable for their actions because they're not responsible. Refuah, bless you. So when the Hachamim are calling Jesus a shoteh, what they're doing is trying to shield him from legal retribution for his actions, including desecrating the Sabbath in public, which would usually be a death penalty. But the rabbis categorizing him as a shoteh prevents him from receiving any sort of punishment whatsoever. How did I get there? Oh, prophecy today. So that's what they're saying, that the people who are prophesying today, they're shotim, because usually if you have a false prophet, that person is hayav, is obligated, receives the death penalty. That we should put them to death. Now, this might be a tangent, but I think it's a worthy tangent and something to think about. Maybe we won't get into it exactly how it works, but that's only for public prophecy, for nivu'ah, for being a navi proper. There's nothing wrong with you personally receiving a private prophecy from God. In other words, you aren't a crazy person if you hear God's voice. You're a crazy person if you try to tell people, I heard God's voice and he's telling me to tell you this. That we know that God isn't doing it anymore. But Harambam, Maimonides, the Kuzari, all of the old Andalusian works of literature are hinting to this idea that the end of the perfection of humanity is a person who receives prophecy. That prophecy is this kind of takes you from being a Homo sapien to a Homo mysticus, meaning that you have this intellectual capacity to subdue your imagination, to subdue your impulses, and to see the world in a post-rational way. And that's a topic for a whole other thing. I believe personally that Harambam had this experience, this mystical experience, and this is what the Hachamim call in our literature entering the Pardes, or entering the orchard. And there's a lot of Sufi literature that parallels this as well, and Christian mysticism that also parallels this idea. But entering the orchard, if you remember the story, I'll recap the story very quickly. 4 people enter this orchard. It's not a literal orchard, it's a metaphor. And all of them succumb to some sort of ill-gotten fate. Either they die, or they go crazy, or they become a heretic. The only person who enters in peace and leaves in peace is Rabbi Akiva. And there's reasons for why that is. And it has to do with his personal level of spiritual intellectualism, if you will, spiritual intelligence. And it's that he was able to hear God's voice without losing his mind. So does prophecy exist today? Depends. If you think if somebody comes along to you and says, God is telling me this, and this is a big problem in Israel, by the way. Every other few years, some rabbi in Israel will come along and say, Eliyahu Navi told me, or God told me that, the world is ending and this is the thing, and there's a big shofar and la 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 la. Do teshuvah. Okay, fine. His message isn't wrong. We should all always be doing teshuvah. Very fine, very good. But you can do that without invoking a connection to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. That's for certain. So, but the thing is that they probably, it's a whole other topic for something else. So yeah, but that's for Jews. I couldn't tell you about non-Jews. There's no if Muslims want to believe that Muhammad is a prophet, or that Jesus is a prophet, or that Joseph Smith is a prophet, that's fine for them to believe. They can believe that, and but it just has nothing to do with our affairs and how we deal with it. I hope that answers. Does that answer okay? Okay. Yoram.
Yeah, I have a good friend, and not only he does prophecy, he claims he's a Mashiach, and asked me years ago to talk to Netanyahu. Now, some of us think that he had some issues, and I wouldn't say more about it, but there are other type of quote prophets, and that's what I call fake news prophets. They do it to benefit politically, financially, or otherwise. Say, I'm a guru. By the way, I want $1,000 membership, and I'll give you salvation. My friend is not like that. He's trying, quote, to save the world, genuinely. So he may have some issues. Though when you talk to him, he's a normal guy, except in this dimension. But there are other people that do it for manipulation. And those people, by the way, should be killed. If you are not legally responsible, that's like the crazy guys. You can't kill a crazy guy just because he acts crazy. If you do it for manipulation, kill them, because they're very dangerous and they are responsible.
This is how you can tell the difference between a quote-unquote real Kabbalist and a fake Kabbalist. A real Kabbalist will never ask you for money, nor will they ever accept money for any things they do. I remember one time, it was right before I was getting engaged, someone in Israel suggested I go to see a certain Kabbalist to get a blessing from him. And it's not my thing, but I was like, all right, why not? He was going to take me. So I went along with it. And we went there and we were waiting, and I was very upset with this whole situation. You had people waiting in this lobby, like a bunch of people waiting for a half hour, an hour, and people would come in, and if they could pay, they would be expedited and be put to the front of the line, and they'd go in right away. And you'd go into his office, he wouldn't look at you, he would just kind of put his hand on you and whatever. And so when I saw that was going on, I was like, I'm gonna leave. I don't want to be here. This is totally not kasher. People. This is one of the things about the way I understand, to take God's name in vain. You shouldn't say beracha v'tala, things like that. But to take God's name in vain, to carry it, is what the word says. This is one of those things. And a person wields God's name as a weapon or as a tool or anything like that. It's not good. It destroys the world. Harambam codifies is Yosere HaTorah. Yeah, not Yosere HaTorah. In excuse me, Hilchot Talmud Torah. In Hilchot Talmud Torah, in the 6th chapter, I believe, halakha number 8, he talks about what he calls shoalim kitanim, little foxes, and it has these little foxes are. It comes from Shir Hashirim, and it is in Shir Hashirim the verse is these little foxes come into the vineyard and ruin the vineyard. And he takes that verse, or the rabbis take that verse, and they are medoresh on it. And the derasha they make is that the vineyard is like God's Torah. And these shoalim kitanim, they are unqualified or bogus rabbis, scholars, prophets, whoever they are. They come in, they demand money, they demand honor, and they ruin the garden, they ruin the orchard, so to speak. And they pervert the religion. So yeah, very, very important to understand the difference between what a real prophet is and a real Chacham is and what a real prophet isn't, or the opposite. That being said, what I believe from the last session of the Kuzarim, Yoram, is that a new hand or is that an old hand? Okay, must be old hand. From the last session, we talked about this prophetic experience, right? Let me just recap it really quickly. You should come. One who comes in contact with the prophet will experience a spiritual renewal when he hears the prophet's divine words. Remember that, and the soul's aspiration to reach angelic levels. And then he said something like, contact with the prophet also serves as demonstrable proof for the rewards of the world to come. And Tamir asked a very good question. It had to be like, isn't that just like a circular, proof? Separate from its physical senses and be envisioned an elevated spiritual being. So he's talking about this coming in contact with the prophet lets you have this sort of elevated experience. I wanted to share a little bit from Derech Hashem by Rabbi Moshe Hayim Luzzatto, but it's at my home, ironically. But he has a section in there. I'm not going to share the whole thing with you right here, but I will share. Can you see this or no? Can you share? I'm sharing a new screen, not the Kuzari. Can you see what I'm sharing now? Okay, let me 1 second. Let me share the new thing. Okay, this is on Sefaria actually, and this is from the part 3 of Derech Hashem. It's called On the Prophetic Experience, right? And it's not a long section. I'm not going to read it all right now. You can I'll put the link in the chat, or if you want to look at it later, you can email me or call me, and I'll provide you the chat. But also, if you're listening on YouTube or something, you can just go to Sefaria, type in Derech Hashem, and you will come across it. But in this section, he gives a whole breakdown of the prophetic experience, how to recognize a real prophet, how to not recognize. He takes basically what Harambam codifies and expands on it. Let's see, how do I get to the chat? There it is, chat. I had a certain section highlighted in the book that I was going to read, but I'm not sure where it is on Sefaria. So rather than scroll through it and find it, I'm just going to present to you that you can find it here. Okay, now let me go back and we'll continue in the Kuzari. During lifetime, nor is there any condition in life. Okay, so the Kuzari responds to the Chacham's answer that, okay, yeah, the Torah is also giving us a good, beneficial, happy life. It's not just all about the world to come. Torah wants us to focus on Olam Hazeh as well, in this world, and the here and now. So the Kuzari added, it's 106. Amar Kuzari, v'lo ra'iti ahad min ha'me'amenim me'odim ahem shehu mita'aveh lenihurotam, aval im haya bichlato la'haram alef shanim. I have never seen any believer in these other rewards wishing that the arrival of these rewards would come sooner. If one of these people had the ability to delay these rewards for 1,000 years so that he could experience a sojourn among the living, he would do so, despite the burdens and miseries of these worlds. In other words, if Olam Haba, if heaven is so great, why are people so adamant about living? Why do people want to live? I mean, I think the answer is apparent. I don't think you need to think about that very much. It's like There was a study done, I don't know, maybe 20 years about now, where I think $1 million or $2.5 million were spent on trying to determine exactly why prisoners want to escape from prison. I don't think you needed to spend $2 million on that. I think we all know why prisoners want to escape from prison. Same thing here. Why do people want to live? It's our drive. We are designed, we are drive to have a survival instinct. So even if, no matter how great Olam Haba is and how much happier people will be, people, generally speaking, don't want to end their life quickly. Now, there are other instances of either people being martyrs on purpose, like they desire it, or people who are struggling with other issues that lead to suicidal thoughts and tendencies. That's a different issue altogether. It's a particular thing, but not what in the general sense of what the Kuzari is observing. Let's continue. The Chacham asks, it's in 107. אמר החבר, ומה תאמר ומי שהוא רואה אלה המעמדים הגדולים המלכותיים. The rabbi asked, but what would you say about someone who is to witness these great angelic spectacles? In other words, the prophetic experience that we spoke of earlier. The mystical experience that I was talking about earlier, about entering the Pardes, about reaching this level of prophecy, or what is often called Ruach HaKodesh, this leads a person to have a different sort of viewpoint, a different sort of outlook on life, on the here and on the after. The Kuzari responds, such a person would unquestionably desire a permanent separation of his soul from his physical senses so that he could bask in the holy light continuously. I must therefore conclude that such a person would desire death. Yoram, go ahead.
You want to scroll, Yosef?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yoram? Okay, maybe not.
No, I was trying to unmute.
There you go.
I don't know. My understanding that Pardes is going to Kabbalah. It doesn't have necessarily much to do with prophecy. I mean, Sandy is teaching the Zohar, so he's going in to quote the Pardes and Maaseh Merkavah. So that's understanding how the world works. And it may or may not have anything to do. Rabbi Akiva, who went to the Pardes, to my knowledge, he was a Chacham, not a Navi. He was not a prophet. He was one of the most advanced, leaders in our Jewish tradition. So I don't know where you are coming from. The Pardes is Nevuah, is prophecy.
Nevuah and a Navi and a Nevuah, then this is a very, very important point to make, and I can't underscore it enough. It is nothing like the non-Jewish idea of what a prophet is. In the non-Jewish idea, a prophet is somebody who sees the future. In the Jewish idea, a prophet is somebody who speaks for God. In order to speak for God, a person has to reach a certain level of intellect and action. And this is what the Hachamim called Hasidim Rishonim. A Hasid isn't somebody, and today we think of Hasid as somebody who wears a long black coat and has a big beard, but a Hasid, and when we talk about Hasidim Rishonim, they are somebody who is one level beneath the level of prophecy. A person can attain a prophetic level, but not be a prophet. Why is that? Because God does not instruct them to say anything. If a prophet is somebody who God instructs, you are going to say such and such to so and so about such and such a time, about this and that action. That is what a Navi is in the Jewish ideology. Can they see the future? If necessary. Can they see the past? If necessary, but it's not an integral part of their job. Their job is to be a spokesperson, a mouthpiece for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the masses. Now, with Pardes and Rabbi Akiva, what I'm asserting here is coming from rabbinic mysticism, which predates the Kabbalah of the Arizal and the Zohar. The Zohar and the Kabbalah of the Arizal are later developments, and they're more of a personal approach. And I'm not discarding them or discounting them, but they're more of a personal approach of these Chachamim, of these particular Chachamim. Whereas the Pardes, it's there to demonstrate the level that Rabbi Akiba was reaching as a Hasid. If he were living in the times where prophecy was an active office, he very well could have been somebody who would have spoken on God's behalf, but it was after the fact. We weren't listening to our prophets anyways, so that office is now not in use. A person can still reach this level of perfection. So that's what I mean by that's why I'm including the Pardes here, and why that is a necessary component to this understanding of what Nevuah is. It's not necessarily seeing the future. What it is here, what he's talking about here, is this level of connecting to Olam Haba, to seeing God, or to understanding what God is wanting from us. I think that's what the Kuzari is talking about here. So here, when I say the Kuzari, I mean the book, not the character. I need to figure out how to differentiate that exactly. But here, when the Kuzari, the character, is asking that such a person who comes in contact or reaches this level of understanding, of intellect, of vision, that wouldn't they want to die? Wouldn't they want to sever all attachment to whatever is physical and holding them back? Why would they want to become part of Olam Hazeh? And this is a question on the Sulam Yaakov. The Sulam Yaakov, you might remember from the Torah, from Genesis, where Yaakov Abinu has a vision of a ladder, of a staircase or a ladder at the bottom on the earth and the top in the heavens, and the angels are ascending and descending. So the understanding Harambam has and the early mystics have is that this is our understanding of prophecy. You have to ascend and experience this world, but you also have to descend again and be back in this world right here. Irene.
Just wanted to comment two things. What you're saying is Herzl is a Chasadim.
One more
And
time.
Herzl is not a prophet, but the one below you said is a Chasadim.
Like Theodore Herzl?
Yeah, that's the only one I know.
Oh, he's not a prophet?
Yeah, what would you consider him? How would you classify him?
I mean, I don't know why I would consider him a prophet.
He was a non-observant Jew, saw something, and spent the rest of his life trying to get a Jewish state.
All right.
And Charlie turned around. He spent all his effort to get a Jewish state, which was not at all what he was before he saw something.
I don't know if
he said if he willed it, it will be true. It will come. I don't know. The other thing is that when I was sick in 1973, I watched TV, and on Gentile religious TV, they have a lot of people who claim that they speak to God. Being a Jew, I never heard of this before. And they all want money, by the way, because they speak to God.
They're charlatans.
And it was quite amazing because I had never heard of any Jew who ever said that they spoke to them. So that's what the Gentiles do. They have certain people who, if you give me enough money, I'll speak to God for you.
Yeah, it's a total sham. Theodore Herzl is the man who had a vision. I think that could be anybody. I mean, there are many people who have like a vision and make that vision come to fruition. Like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, they had visions of what they wanted to build. I don't think that they're prophets. Just because you have a vision that you bring to fruition doesn't make you a prophet at all. like I said, what a prophet is somebody who speaks on God's behalf. Like somebody is sitting there, and then God says, "Hey, Yonah, tell the people in Tarshish, tell the people in Nineveh that I'm going to destroy them. Go do it." And he goes and he tells them, or he tries to run away and things don't go well. The prophet speaks on God's behalf. That's a navi. That's like what that is specifically. If you hear God's voice, there isn't really a category for that. The Hachamim today say that most people who hear God's voice, they're mentally unstable. If a person, in order for a person to hear God's voice, they have to have a real high level of intellect and action, and they really have to be on the up and up, a real example of what the greatness of humanity can be. And most people today that speak on God's behalf are not that. They have nothing to do with the greatness of humanity, and they're just trying to line their pockets, exactly like you saw on those television programs. Let's see here. Let's go forward. Okay, yes. So wouldn't they want death? Wouldn't these people who experience this mystical, prophetic, anything close to seeing Olam Haba and understanding that this world isn't everything and there's something beyond, wouldn't they want to get there faster? Why still be here? Haber responds, Amar Haber, but the guarantees of reward in our religion are not related to an afterlife. Rather, they are our bonding to divinity through prophecy and near prophecy. This near prophecy is what Ruach HaKodesh is, or being a Hasid. And the attachment of divinity to our people with grandeur, glory, and wonders. That is why it does not say in our Torah that if you will perform this commandment, I will bring you to gardens and pleasure. And he's referring to the Islamic vision after death. What the Torah does say is that you will be a nation to me, and I will be a God to you, and I will lead you. Some of you will stand before me. That is to be, the note says here, that is to act as ministers of God, similar to, but not limited to, the role of the Kohanim. This is why, and he goes on to say, this is why the note I'm talking about goes on to explain, this is why it says you will be a Memlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, and some will ascend to the heavens. This refers to prophets who used to roam among the angels. These angels refer to the prophets as son of man, or Ben Adam. A good example of somebody we call son of man is Yahazkel. How do you say Yahazkel? Ezekiel. So that they would be able to distinguish them from the angels in their midst. Oh, he even says in the note. Look, I should read the notes more often. This title was given to Yahazkel. The rabbi understands that the other prophets who achieved Yahazkel's level and even greater levels were also given this title by the angels. I may have shared this before, but my understanding of why Yehezkel is also this is a nice reason, by the way, because Yehezkel was so lofty and envisioning things as an angel. He went up that ladder and was up there a lot, in a metaphorical sense. And because of that, the angels had to distinguish him. It's like when an Ashkenazi Jew would move to a Sephardic country, they would inevitably end up, their last name would become Ashkenazi. And that's why if you meet anyone today named Ashkenazi, they're most undoubtedly going to be Sephardic. A good example of this is Hacham Svi Ashkenazi. Hacham Svi came from Poland or Germany. I'm not sure exactly where Hacham Svi came from, but he moved to Salonika, and he learned in the yeshivot of Salonika, and he became known as the Hacham Svi. And I think today most Ashkenazim return to him as the Hacham Svi or Hacham Svi Ashkenazi. And because of that, he was from another place, and they needed to they differentiated between him and them. So here too, when one of these prophets becomes so engulfed and so elevated, the angels call him Ben Adam, son of man. And this is another thing, Yehezkel, one of the other reasons Yehezkel is called Ben Adam, and this is my one of my understandings that I learned from Rabbi Chaim Angel is that, I think it was Rabbi Chaim Angel. But anyways, I'll give him the credit. Is that a Kohen, which is what Yehezkel was. Yehezkel was a Kohen. When they are serving, when they are doing their avodah, they are not their own personality. They kind of divest themselves of their own personality and act as a medium on behalf of the nation. So he's not Yehezkel anymore. He's just Ben Adam, just person. And for that reason, since Yehezkel was a Kohen, that's how he related to his own prophecy. I do want to point out that Son of Man is also found in the New Testament, the Christian Bible, and it's a title given to Jesus. This is one of the many proofs that the people who wrote the Gospels didn't really understand Hebrew or Jewish culture, because when they give Jesus the title Son of Man, the non-Jews that is, they're sort of designating him as this messianic figure. Their understanding of what a messianic figure is, but of course to us it just means human being. So no Jew would have called Jesus Son of Man and mean it to mean the Messiah, just as an aside. Scripture also states that angels will roam among you, and you will see them, sometimes only one, sometimes many at a time. They will protect you and fight for you. How do we understand this? What do we mean by angels will roam amongst you and you'll see them, and what does that mean? I don't know if we've covered this before. We might have in this class. We might have in when we were learning Harambam. Angels are not physical, right? They're ethereal. They don't have a physical body. They don't have how do you see something without a physical body? In order to be clear, that we're not talking about little tiny babies with cute wings. That's not really what a cherub is, a kerub, right? Or seraphim with the 6 wings. That's not a real thing. What do we? Go ahead, Anne. You're on mute.
Yet in the Bible, we hear of Abraham having 3 visitors in male form.
Yes.
And obviously we are told these are angels because they prophesied that he will have a child, he and Sarah. So, but these are angels in male, in man forms, form of man. I have another thing I'd love to share with you about possible prophets or possible angels.
Go ahead.
And it's totally just something I came up with, but it just makes me interested to pursue it a little farther. I think I told you one time, Yosef, there's a book called The Horse Boy, about an autistic boy whose parents took him to Mongolia because he loved horses, and they took him there to talk with a tribe and shamans there who could help autistic children. And they took him to this one shaman who actually did help him in many different ways. This autistic boy who had never spoken before and was not toilet trained and everything. And this shaman helped him like overnight by putting his hands on him and talking to him. The shaman said in this book, that these kinds of children, autistic children, they are to be elevated and revered because they are very close to God, or they are on a totally different level. So I'm wondering, they're a totally different level than most humans. So I'm wondering if some of these prophets might have been autistic.
That's an interesting thought. I think it's very possible. Autism is just what we call today neurodiversity. And there's a spectrum, and a lot of people associate autism with like this debilitating, is that how you pronounce it? Debilitating mental illness, and that it's something to there are many people who are autistic and don't even realize it.
Hmm.
Is it possible that a prophet that one of the prophets or many of the prophets were autistic? Possible, very possible. I don't think it's impossible. I don't even think it's improbable. Um, a pro-
Because these children don't, I'm trying to think of the word, they don't associate with us on the same levels. They are at totally different mental levels than we are, many of them. And I'm wondering if the prophets, you know, they were also on a different level than the normal humans.
Yeah, I mean the prophets. I think my understanding of a prophet, it's not inherent. Sometimes I don't know. I don't think it's inherent. I think it's something that a person can work on. Moshe Rabbeinu had disability. He had a stuttering issue, and prophecy is speaking. Despite his stuttering issue or cleft palate, whatever it was, God chose him to be a prophet because, and it had to do also with the level that Moshe Rabbeinu brought himself to. When he was in Midian all that time, Seforno has a very good comment. Seforno was Ovadia Seforno was an Italian commentator. He has a very in-depth commentary of his perspective of what Moshe was doing. Moshe Rabbeinu was doing all this time in Midian, and it wasn't just shepherding. It was perfecting his spiritual life. It was perfecting his intellect, perfecting his prayer. He would go to Har Hashem all the time. That's where he encounters the burning bush for the first time. And it wasn't a fluke. It was something he was working on. And despite his physical limitations, he became the greatest prophet of all time. I think that could very well be true with also any sort of limitation. Almost any sort of limitation. It's something that a person, it has to do with the refinement. Is that a word? Refining? I'll just say refining of character, refining of a person's actions. And this is what the Torah is really aiming to eventually. To be the Memlechet Kohanim, we need to be a people that are together in this journey of prophecy. The foundational element of our religion is that God can speak to people and people can speak to God. Otherwise, how do we even formulate a berit, with a covenant with this being? It's all imaginary otherwise. And this is the difference between a non-Jewish prophet, I would say, and a Jewish prophet. That the Jewish prophet is using the imagination. There's imaginative faculty. You have to be able to process and visualize things, right? You have to have the visions of Herzl or Zuckerberg or whoever, Havdil. But you also have to be able to command your imagination, not be ruled by it, not be controlled by it, to see the world for quote unquote what it really is. In the Gemara, you'll see something over and over again when they're teaching Gemara, when they're teaching halakha and comparing halakhic arguments. They'll say, Tashma, right? Come and shema, hear. And it means to understand. But in rabbinic mystical literature, like in the Zohar, or in the Talmud Yerushalmi, the phrase is not tashma, it's tahazeh. Tahazeh means come and see, come and visualize. Like Hazon Ovadia, right? We read Hazon Ovadia before Tisha B'Av, and Hazon is the vision of, or the seeing, the thing that we saw. So tahazeh means more than just come and hear and listen and obey, but come and see, come and experience, come and understand through your firsthand knowledge. That's a mystical approach in how somebody can reach. So yeah, anyone who can do that can reach that. I see your hand, Yoram. 1 second. I wanted to show, because Anne brought up the Parashat Vayera, where he sees 3 men, right, or 3 people that are angels. So this is how it says in the Torah. It says Vayisana Vayera v'hinei shelosha anashim nitzavim alav uyara vayiratz likrata mitahawel v'ishtahahu alza. He sees shelosha anashim, 3 men. And the Targum uzakef nehon wehaza, the haza like I just mentioned, he saw v'hatarata guvrin, he sees 3 guvrin, etc., etc. It doesn't say angels, right? And in the original, an older version of this understanding is that they are three prophets that come and visit him, and this is why they have first-hand knowledge. Another older idea was that it was God in physical form and two angels, and that midrash kind of got dropped around the time people started speculating that Jesus was God in physical form. No one quoted that midrash anymore, and then the midrash that replaced it was the idea that nope, these are three angels. Yeah, and why would people think that these three angels are men, or that the three angels are prophets? It's because one of the ways we understand prophet, angel, is also a prophet. This is why in later on in the Sulam Yaakov, when it says that there are angels melachim ascending and descending, that the understanding was that these are prophets, because a malach is someone who is a messenger of God, and that's exactly what a prophet is as well. They're a messenger of God, and that's what he means. I think what the Kuzari means here about angels roaming among you, and that they will protect you and fight for you. These are people, prophets, who have reached this level and have come down to our level, so to speak, again, to instruct us, to teach us, so we can learn from them, and that's how they protect us. That's how we see them among us, etc., etc. Go ahead, Yoram.
Well, one comment is there are human beings that happen to be prophets, and angels, by definition, are messengers of God. Most human beings don't have this level of connection with Hashem. But you said something that I have an issue with. You kind of say Mamlechet Kohanim or something like that. And to me, a Kohen and a Navi, a prophet and a Kohen, are distinctly very different type of roles. You know, Moshe was a Navi and Aaron was a Kohen. And actually, Achad Ha'am wrote a beautiful essay I recommend to everybody to read about Kohen v'Navi, which is the Kohen is a politician. Aaron was a politician. He wanted peace and was compromising truth for what the people wanted. A Navi connects with God, and Moshe could not connect well with the people. He needed Aaron. So to me, the Kohanim are very important people, and they do God's work, but they may not have the ability to transmit messages from Hashem.
It could be, only that Aaron was also a prophet. Aaron was also a Navi, and many of our most beloved prophets were also Kohanim. Eliyahu Navi was a Kohen. Yehezkel was a Kohen. And Moshe Rabbeinu did serve as the Kohen until Aaron was established as the Kohen Gadol. He was the one. Moshe Rabbeinu served as the priest.
They are great people.
Offices are totally different.
They're just different roles, and one person could do both. You can be a Kohen and a Navi. You can be a Kohen and not a Navi. You can be a Navi and not a Kohen. It's like two by two, 4 permutations.
Yeah, of course. And the role of Navi isn't limited to people who are not Kohanim, is what I'm trying to say. And that it's a status of being that is sort of a goal for Am Yisrael. If you remember correctly, Datan and Aviram, I think it's Datan and Aviram, start prophesying against Moshe Rabbeinu and start talking about his death, and Yeshua gets very upset about it, and he goes to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, you got to shut them up. They're prophesying this and that. Moshe Rabbeinu says that all of our people should be prophets and should be able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on this level. It's something that we, for the prophetic vision of Am Yisrael, something that we need to reclaim and reorient ourselves with and have a better relationship with it. And I think the reason Am Yisrael today has this negative or incorrect, this very Christian view of prophecy is because of Christianity and Islam, and not blaming them, but we started to view our scriptures and our culture through their lenses. And so it's what we can call semantic assimilation. It's not. It's when we lose sight of our own purpose, our own mission, because we're listening to other people of how we should be viewing things. And saludi bracha. Other people should, when they read our Torah, go ahead, have your own interpretation. Like last week, the Pope said something about how the law can't give true salvation, and that's why you need Jesus. And some rabbis got upset and wrote to the Pope and said, you need to take it back and clarify. I don't think that's, if the Pope wants to read the Bible that way, he's the Pope. He can do what he wants. He's a different religion. They can have their own views of things. We don't have to accept their views. We can say, that's interesting, or we disagree. We do it this way instead. And I think what we need to do is we need to reclaim our prophetic books. We need to reclaim our prophetic identity, and that's how we're going to get closer and closer to Yemei HaMashiach. We'll end here today. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, or complaints, or anything like that? I'm surprised. That's very impressive. Okay, Mark, do you want to say something?
I was going to say next week is Rosh Hashanah.
Right. So next week is Rosh Hashanah. We will not be meeting next week.
And how about in between Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, the 15th?
I think we could do that. If anything changes, I'll let you guys know. It's always good to get more Torah learning in if you can, and it's in the morning, so it's far away from Yom Kippur anyway. So we'll see. I'll let you guys know, and if we can do it, please God, we'll meet 2 weeks from now. Until then, everybody have Shana Tova, Muvarechet. As we say, what do people say in Yiddish? They say a good yar, right? In Ladino, we say Anyada Buena. Everybody should have a good year, many years. Tizku L'Shanim Raboth. All right, everybody.
Well, it should be Tova Umetuka.
Amen.
Every year is a good year if you believe that God is good.